Hi, I'm Jenn Carroll, LHS class of 2006. I am currently working in Los Angeles as a producer for film and television. Right now, I'm working from home just like you guys are. We've assembled our writer's room for the final season of Better Call Saul, and we're all working just via Zoom, via teleconference. And we're very lucky because if we were in production right now, if we were on set, or even if we were in editorial, it would be really, really hard to do our jobs. But right now, because the writer's job is to just sit around and break the story all together, they're able to do that via teleconference. And so I'm here to answer a few of your video production questions. So let's go. First question is, do you think it's important to go to film school? This is a really good question that's often debated in my office. Do you need a degree in film in order to work on a show? And it's tricky to say because the short answer is no. You might have everything you need to create your first feature film. You might have a camera already, might have a laptop to edit it, you can distribute it on YouTube, or you might have connections. But for me, when I was graduating high school in Lunenburg, I didn't know anybody in Los Angeles. And so when I went to Boston University to study film, I met this whole big group of like-minded individuals from all over the globe who were really passionate about film and television, and I got to work with them and learn from them. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I ended up living, with a bunch of them. And when I was looking for jobs, those were the people that were looking out for me. And the people who had graduated from BU a few years above, those were the ones that helped me get my first internships, helped me get my first production assistant jobs. And getting your foot in the door is really, really hard unless you have connections. So if only for the network, it might be worth it for you to go to film school. Plus the resources. When I went to film school, I worked in the TV lab so that I would have access to all of the best microphones and the cameras and everything. I knew how to check them out. I worked on a TV show that was part of the College of Communications student-run TV station. And that alone is the reason to go to Boston University, because I had the best time working on the nation's longest college-run soap opera. A 3-camera in-studio shoot. The students build the set every week. All the actors are students, and you have students writing, producing, directing, editing it the whole way along. And none of the teachers help you. It's just the students teach each other, and there has been no experience for me that was more like working on a real film set than that. It translated perfectly. So that alone was worth it. The next question is, how did I wind up on these shows? The answer to that is, when I graduated film school, I moved out to Los Angeles because you pretty much need to be here in order to work here. It'd be great to, have a job already lined up before you move out, but that pretty much never happens. More likely you move out and you prepare to be unemployed for a while, and you prepare to have multiple jobs. I was ready to go work at Best Buy, for however many months until I landed my first production assistant job. But luckily by reaching out to the whole network of people I knew from college, I was able to land a few temp jobs. And so I worked as a post-production assistant, I worked as an office production assistant, any sort of bottom of the totem pole job I could find, until I landed my first permanent job on the show Men of a Certain Age as an office production assistant. That's the job where you work in the production office, which is the sort of the heart of the production. You are the assistant to everybody. So you're the first line of defense between the outside world, anybody who wants to call, and the show. And then if costumes needs an extra hand running, some returns back to a department store, or if the folks on the set need an extra person to help the script supervisor, you are, everybody's assistant. And that was great for me because it meant I got to meet every single person on the crew and sort of learn a little bit about what their jobs were. And so after that job, I knew I didn't want to be an office PA forever. I pretty much learned all I was going to learn about paperwork and, who might call the office. And so I told everyone I worked with, I'm really looking for a job as a post-production assistant because I was focused on becoming a director. And so the best way to direct is to know how to edit. If you don't know how things are going to come together, you'll never be able to know what to get on the day. You'll be wasting your time. So I figured I'll get really good at editing, and then that will translate into directing. And so I was put up for a job as a post-production assistant on the show Breaking Bad, and it worked out. And I have stayed with those folks ever since for almost 10 years now. And so I became after a season as a post-production assistant, I swapped over to the writer's office, and then moved on up on that road until I became an associate producer on Better Call Saul, which is where I am now. What is my involvement in the production process? So I am a non-writing creative producer. What that means is that I'm not a line producer. That's the person who deals with the money on the show. And I'm not a writing producer because most of our writers are producers or co-EPs or executive producers. It's a certain title to show seniority. But I'm a non-writing creative producer. And what that means is that I'm a problem solver on set. I am a information conduit, because film and TV, it's all a collaboration. It's a very, very collaborative business. And what that means is that there are a lot of people that have opinions on every single decision that goes into every small detail of every scene. So say our costume designer has prepped 7 options for one character to be wearing in one scene. What that means is that I should take that information and I check with the director and the writer and the producers about what they think this character should be wearing, present all the options, and then I take all of their differing opinions, or maybe they're all on the same page, even better, and I bring that information to the showrunner and say, hey, these folks would like this character to be wearing X, Y, or Z, and the showrunner, with whom the buck stops, makes the final decision, but then I have to go back to everybody and say, this is what the showrunner wants to do, and make sure that both the showrunner and everybody else involved with the decision-making process is happy and feels like they were able to voice their opinion. And we do that not just on one costume and one scene, we do that for every prop, every location, every piece of art direction, every single detail that goes into making every episode goes through all of these people, and it's a lot of information. And so it's my job to be on email all day or on the phone or talking to people in person, trying to make sure that everybody has all the information they need all the time. And then on set, sometimes problems come up at the last minute. There's a question that, maybe the actors have, they want to run by the showrunner. So it might be my job to call from New Mexico to our office back in Burbank and say, hey, so-and-so has this question. And a lot of times, no one really knows who to ask each question. And so the producer is the person that you go to, and it's their job to know who to ask. You have to know every single person's job on a set. You have to know who to call for small emergencies and big emergencies. And it's your job to make everybody feel like they're heard. The next question is, what does a typical day look like? Every day is different. So it depends on what part of the process we're in on any given project. If we're in the writing stage, like we are now in the final season of Better Call Saul, my job is just to listen in as the writers break every episode. The way they do that is up on a cork board as they talk through each scene and sort of land on the final details what the scene will be. They write out on index cards, in Sharpie, the essential details of the scene. This is a way to really distill the scene down to its specific drama, so that everybody in the room knows, including me, what the point of each scene is. And they do that for every single scene, all, the teaser in 4 acts, and then we go to the outline and then, script, and then we're off to the races. So during writing and during the breaking, my job is really chill. It's great. It's just listening to brilliant people talk about brilliant things. And then when pre-production starts, it's my job to be in all of our, department-wide meetings. Or crew-wide meetings, I should say. So we have a concept meeting at the beginning of every episode. We have a production meeting once people have started gaining a bit of traction on the episode. And then we have a tone meeting, which is a more intimate meeting with the director, the producers, and the showrunner and the writer, to talk in really specific detail for sometimes up to 7 hours for a single episode, about the point of each scene, to go back to those basics that were coming up in the writer's room very early on, and talk about the plan to shoot every single scene so that the director, who's often a guest, the producers and the writers, they're with the show year round, but a director is often only there for 3 weeks, and then they move on to the next thing. They're more journeymen and women, as opposed to the crew family that stays with the show year round. So after the tone meeting, then life is a little bit different again. When I'm in production, I'm fielding all of those questions, hundreds of emails a day sometimes, and looking for small moments where I can ask the director or the producers or the writer their opinions on every little thing, so that I can get back to the department heads and tell them what we want to move forward with. And then I'm also responsible for watching all of the takes as they happen, as we're filming, and making sure that all of those things that we discussed in the tone meeting and all those other meetings, that they're showing up on screen, that the showrunners and the writer's vision are coming to fruition, and the director has all the support that they need. And then who knows? There could be calls saying like, "Oh no, we're missing this prop on set. Can you go and talk to so and so and have them run out and buy such and such?" You know, it's like that kind of in the moment problem solving. You are there to help whoever needs help whenever they need it. So that's my job during production. And then when we get to post production, which is probably my favorite part of the process, you're just sitting in a dark room, you and the editor, the director when it's the director's cut. I usually sit in with the showrunners when they do their cut after the director has weighed in, unless my boss has directed an episode. It's my cat again. My job is to sit in, watch the scenes. If I remember there being a better take of something, I'll bring that up. If I feel like something could be moving more quickly, I can give that note. So I just sit in, have an opinion, because so often producing is just having an opinion because you're invested in the project and you're with it from start to finish. And so they want people who really, really care about the work to weigh in, because everybody has their mind on 100 different things at every moment, and everyone's exhausted because they're running around, and creative work is still very exhausting, even though it's really fun field to be in. But it's my job to be an extra set of eyes looking out for the show. Then, after we've locked an episode, my job might be to sit in on a spotting session, which is where the producers, the writer, the showrunner talk to our sound supervisors, our composer, our music supervisor, music editor, and our ADR supervisor about all of the different sound-related finishing that we want to do on an episode. Like if a line sounds bad and we really want to have it re-recorded, we tell our ADR supervisor that. If we really want the backgrounds of a scene to have like a certain type of cicadas, or we want it to be really busy, or we want it to feel like no car is passing by because it's a really lonely neighborhood, like that's the kind of thing we bring up during those meetings. And then once we do that, a typical day might be listening to score and music options from our composer and music supervisor for a bunch of different scenes before we go to mix it. And then a whole day might be spent at the mix stage when we're finishing up the episode and putting all of the final pieces together. So the great thing about being a creative producer is you get to be everywhere. You get to see start to finish the whole process through, and this makes you a better writer, it makes you a better editor, it makes you a better director. And while what you're doing specifically might be a little administrative, it's also very creative because you get a window that almost no one else gets other than the showrunner into what the show is. What was the most pivotal moment on your path? I think for me, the most pivotal moment was when I switched from focusing on directing to focusing on producing. Because when I was a post-production assistant, all I could think of was like directing. I have to get on set. And then, as part of working on Breaking Bad, I saw these amazing non-writing producers, Michelle and Melissa, and I thought, wow, they get to be involved in everything. Our boss Vince trusts them more than anyone, and they learn so much every day, and they're very hands-on involved with all parts of the process. And I thought, that is the job I want to do. So when an opportunity came up to switch to the writer's office, I was nervous because I thought, I'm not trained as a writer necessarily. That's not the path I saw for myself. But I really want to work in the writer's office because in TV, at least, in film it's different, but in TV, the writer is kind of king or queen. Like the writer is the one that is the big boss, and that's where all the decisions filter through. And so I thought if I work in the writer's office, then it'll be my job, as it ended up being, it'll be my job to be on the phone with our producers in Albuquerque all day, and then I'll be the one as an assistant filtering all that information from Albuquerque to Vince, our showrunner. And that's how it turned out. And even though I didn't do, I wasn't in the writer's room very often, I wasn't pitching ideas, I wasn't responsible for, writing any scripts, by being in the writer's office, I learned so much, and that put me on a producing path that's brought me so much joy. And then I could take everything I learned producing and translate it to directing. And luckily the show has given me opportunities to try my hand at, editing, writing, directing on a lot of small projects that, that our bosses were just, too busy to take on. They gave to the support staff. And so I've had quite a journey on the show. If you could do anything differently than what you did, what would you do? Similar to the question about the most pivotal moment, I wish that I'd had more faith in my ability to be a good writer. Because when I was in film school, I was surrounded by all of these incredibly talented people who were such better writers than I did. I thought their ideas were more interesting, that their dialogue was more snappy. I just was so intimidated that I focused only on the things I felt confident in, which were, camera work, cinematography, editing, like that, those kind of crafts I felt really confident in, but writing terrified me. And so I never exercised those skills after film school. Like when no one was telling me I had to turn in an assignment, write a 10-page script, I stopped doing it. Until I had been working on these shows for a long time, and I started to realize if I want to tell my own stories, no one's going to pay me to direct, someone else's work. I'll never be able to get my foot in the door as a director unless I write something myself that I can then shoot and prove that I can do both. And so I wish I'd started writing earlier. And right now, I, do as much breaking of my own stories as possible. But I wish I had started 8 years ago, because then I'd be 8 years a better writer now. What part of the process is the most fun? For me, the most fun process is editorial. It's quiet. You've already gotten all the footage you're going to get. And then it's just solving a puzzle. It's like, what's the best way to elevate the material? When you're writing, when you're scouting, it's all possibility. Though, having said that, my favorite part of production is definitely location scouting, because it's usually the first thing you do. Day one, when you show up for me, it's showing up in New Mexico, or wherever you show up on set, you get to drive around in a van with all these lovely department heads. You've got your location coordinator, you've got your production designer, you've got your producers, the director, the writer, and you just drive around, and it feels like you have all the time in the world to make decisions. Everything is possibility. And that's the most fun part of the process. And as soon as you choose locations, then you're just running out of time. And you'll never have enough time to shot list. You'll never have enough time to rehearse with the actors, and pre-production speeds by. But that first day of pre-production, when you're doing location scouting, that is the best. And then the best part of the process overall, I think, is still editorial, because it's just problem solving and elevation of material. Are there any techniques you use to sharpen your skills on a daily basis? How often would you say you work on your camera shots? I don't usually shot list unless there's a specific script that I'm working on, but I do take a lot of photos. And I think that that's a really easy way to practice getting different shots, even if it's a phone camera. I do have a SLR camera as well. I have a Sony Alpha, and I have a few different type of lenses for that. So I'll go out and I'll try and convince people to pose for me, or I'll go hiking and try and do some interesting landscape photography. But I think that the best way to practice your shots is just to take a lot of them, and photography is a really easy way to work on your composition skills. When it comes to shot listing a specific project, the way that I usually do it is once I found the location, I will drag a few friends out to be models to try and figure out the blocking of a certain scene, and then I'll walk around with my camera and take every single picture I could ever imagine needing. Do all the close-ups, walk around, do every wide shot. I worked with a director who we would, on the location scouts, find the perfect wide shot, and then she would turn around and say, you know what, I want to go 100 more yards. She'd walk even further away and find an even more beautiful, wider wide shot. And you can only do that when you spend a lot of time in the location before the day, because on the day you're gonna be running around, people are gonna be yelling at you, asking questions, you have to work with the actors. On the day you really want to focus on performance. So during pre-production, that is when you want to spend hours and hours in the locations, figuring out where you want to be, and then you can craft the perfect order in which to shoot all your shots. So usually, if I'm working on something, grab a bunch of friends, I will buy them lunch, have them model, take a ton of photos, and then I bring all those photos home and I create a photo storyboard, sort of edit it for myself, almost like an animatic, so that I can know exactly This is why editorial comes in handy when you want to direct. But I put it together exactly what I want it to be like, and then I take those photos and I put them on a board so that everybody, like the camera operator, the DP, they can look at the photo and be like, oh, I know exactly what you want in the frame. And everybody's on the same page about what you're trying to do. And when you have all those photos in advance and you have a shot list, that's a good plan. Because you could draw them out. If you are a more talented artist than I am, you could illustrate your own storyboards. I can't. I have to use photos. But once people sort of know the composition you're looking for, you can work with your assistant director on the schedule for the day to make sure that you're shooting everything at the right time. Because ideally, you have this, you're never shooting into the sun, you're always shooting into the sun. What you want is for the sun to be the opposite of where it is now in this shot. You want the sun to be kind of behind your actors so that you get a nice golden backlight, separating your actor from the background. And so when you know all the angles you want to get, you can plan where is the sun going to be in the sky, and then you make sure you get the most beautiful shots you can. As I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of breaking one of the other rules of cinematography, which is never shoot into a wall if you don't have to. You always try and shoot the most depth as you possibly can. This is a much more interesting frame than when that door was closed and it was just a white wall behind me. But I have another cat that might try and get in. Last question is, what would your message to high school and college students who aim to succeed in filmmaking be? I think the best way to succeed is early on, when you have the chance, if you have the chance, do as many jobs as you possibly can. Before you get pigeonholed into one career, try out being a grip, try out being a DP, try out being an editor, try being a writer, try and do as many jobs as you can, because there's probably a lot of jobs out there that you didn't even know existed that you would love and that you'd be great at. That was my experience, because I didn't know about non-writing producing until I worked on a show, and I thought that is the job that I would really love to do next. And you can think about, of course, you might want to be a director, writer, showrunner years from now, but it's very helpful to always know what job you want to do next. And right out of college, for me, I wanted to be an office PA, because that was an entry-level position that meant that I could interact with everybody and learn a lot. And then from there, I knew what job I wanted to do next. It was to work as a post-production assistant. It's good to know sort of the ladder of how can people help you in the immediate, and then what do you want to do in the long run? Like, do you want to direct? Do you want to focus on writing? Do you want to be a cinematographer? It's good to have a short-term and a long-term plan. And so the best way to learn about what all of the jobs are is to work as an assistant, doing in as many different departments as you can, either as an intern or as a production assistant. You can meet a lot of people and learn a lot of things. Some other advice that I've picked up along the way. The first is your best special effect is casting. If you cast the right person in the right role, then you don't need a lot of fancy tricks. Like, that's most of the directing work done for you, is finding the right person to portray a character. It'll save you a lot of time if you take extra time meeting as many actors as possible for each role and really considering what people bring to the table. A good actor will make you look very good as a director. Another piece of advice is don't slack on audio. The thing that really sets amateur from professional productions apart is having really good sounding audio. You might have the most beautiful shots anyone has ever seen on the most high-end camera, and it will look so unprofessional if when someone starts talking, they're all muffled and not mic'd. So anything you can do to get clean audio and spend some time polishing it and creating interesting soundscapes for your backgrounds and finding the right score, it'll make your videos really stand out. The next piece of advice is, if you have a really cool, really interesting shot, try only to use it once. Because every time you cut back to it as part of your normal cutting pattern, it's going to become less and less interesting and the novelty will wear off. So if you have the discipline and you have the footage, just once, only once. Yes, the last advice I would have for folks starting out is always know whose point of view you're in for a scene. I shot this short film a couple years ago, and I was really proud of it. All of the shots were exactly how I wanted them to be. I edited it exactly as I felt like it was written and as I had storyboarded it. And I thought it was like really clean, and I was really proud of it. And I showed it to my boss, and he just sat there and he was like, okay, I don't think it has a point of view. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I think it's too third person omniscient. It's too neutral. You know, you're following this person, then you're following that person, and you have a good sense of the geography and the shots look nice, but the piece as a whole would be better if you went back and recut it to be specifically from one person's point of view so that the audience knows whose eyes they're viewing the scene through. They know who to relate to. And so that really threw me for a loop, but I went back, re-edited it just from one person's point of view, really worried that people wouldn't be able to follow certain parts of the geography. And he was right. He was totally right, and I was wrong. So I think it's really important to always know, have the camera tell the story, but know whose story you're telling for the most impact and to tell the story properly. So good luck. Hopefully I will hear from you guys again soon. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. All right, bye.